Before we jump into today's video, I need to make it absolutely crystal freaking clear that this entire thing is being done for education and harm reduction. I repeat, I do not suggest that anybody watching tries any of these horrible compounds, especially number one. Don't you dare go near number one. We are just trying to keep all you beautiful people safe. Again, the intent of this video is not to promote or glorify anything. The intent is to educate and to deter people away from using any of these things. Thank you. Hello to all of you beautiful people watching today's video. And as the thumbnail suggests, number one will shock you. These are the 5 most addictive drugs. With a serious face. Of course, this video is done for safety and harm reduction. I want to keep all you guys safe. I'm not advocating the use of any of these heavily addictive compounds, especially number one. So let's just dive headfirst into this one. And the 5th most addictive is cocaine. Of course, when it's turned into its sister compound, well, I mean, it's just the same thing, just in a different formation. Crack cocaine, it becomes much more addictive, and this is because when you smoke rock, it hits you faster. So anything that hits you faster, you know, that's absorbed quicker, is going to spike the amount of dopamine release. It's going to spike your high into new levels, and whether you're smoking rock or whether you're just snorting lines of white, it's an addictive substance any way you cut it. Cocaine is one of those things that destroys lives. Unlike the other things on this list, cocaine doesn't have as much overdose potential. Now, a lot of the overdose potential attached to cocaine is actually when people are mixing it with other things, even mixing with alcohol, which creates cokeethylene in the body, which is actually much more dangerous internally to your organs than just cocaine on its own. But a lot of people aren't out here overdosing on coke. I mean, it happens, but it's not nearly as common. But what makes cocaine so deadly is the fact that once people start their addictions, sometimes they do keep it for life, and it leads to other destructive behaviors like buying hookers. And this can, of course, destroy families. On its own is heavily addictive in the sense where a lot of people will blow all of their money on it. Unfortunately, some people will actually turn to selling their bodies, and that is just a testament to just how dangerous and debilitating this is. As for the neurotransmitter release, again, you're going to find a theme here, primarily going to be launching your brain full of dopamine. Now, cocaine is actually a reuptake inhibitor. Now, interesting note, Ritalin, also known as methylphenidate, a commonly prescribed substance for ADHD, has the same pharmacological profile as cocaine. I mean, obviously they're different substances, but they're both dopamine reuptake inhibitors, which I've always found interesting. So all those kids crushing up the Ritalin and snorting it, they're getting, you know, it's a similar high. I'm not trying to give you guys any ideas. Number 4, the 4th most addictive drug. We gotta hand it to alcohol. Now, what makes alcohol so dangerous is the fact that it is so socially acceptable in almost all countries across the world. One of the most acceptable and accessible drugs is ethanol, my man alcohol. And a lot of people start young. They start as kids. Maybe the first time they had a drink was their parents giving them that innocent glass of wine with dinner. And slowly they learn through their teenage years that if they're having social anxiety, nervous around women, just drink some liquid courage, it alleviates it. You're going to find a trend here. All of these addictive substances are things that are packed full of euphoria, things that can alleviate somebody's problems or troubles. Alcohol is also, not only it's a depressant, alcohol also lowers inhibitions. This means that if you're somebody who feels very inhibited by their thoughts, you overthink things, you're worried all the time, the alcohol can slow that process down, depresses the central nervous system, and it can make you feel like you can, I don't know, like you have a sense of confidence that you never had before because you're no longer being inhibited by your anxieties. It has anxiolytic properties. It is a substance that a lot of people abuse, and when it is heavily abused, it's one of the hardest to kick because it's one of those rare substances where the withdrawals can kill you. If you are a heavy alcoholic, you can't go cold turkey. There are numerous stories of people dying in rehab because they went to rehab and they were refused even a sip of alcohol, which could have saved their life. Now, I don't know about you guys, but any substance where I need to keep taking it or else I'll die is something that I'm going to avoid becoming addicted to at all costs. Of course, there's so many social repercussions attached to being an alcoholic as well. It destroys your life. It destroys families. In terms of destroying your life, I mean, look at drunk drivers. Look at, you know, huge strain it has on your organs, liver cirrhosis. It's also one of the most common substances to be found in somebody's system after they committed suicide. How many murders happen because somebody was drunk. It is a very destructive compound that unfortunately is the staple of many societies across the world, and it is so socially acceptable, a lot of people don't even realize that it is in fact a drug. Not only a drug, it's a very hard drug. There's a lot of illegal substances that would never touch the danger potential of alcohol. For example, mushrooms. Nobody's ever died from eating too many mushrooms, at least not physically speaking, but people aren't eating too many mushrooms and then dropping dead from an overdose. And mushrooms are illegal in a lot of places, but then we got legal stuff like alcohol that's killing people numerous ways, left, right, and center, and people drink it with a smile and they see it as the answer to all their problems. Like, you know, if you're celebrating a win, let's have some drinks. If you're not celebrating a loss, but if you're enduring a heavy loss, let's have some drinks. It cheers you up when you're down. It makes you feel better when you're already up. It's a very versatile compound that unfortunately has a lot of risks attached to it. Number 3, third most addictive substance, we got to hand it over to ice. Meth. Methamphetamine. Those blue rocks from Breaking Bad.
Maybe blue, but it's the bomb.
Blue, yellow, pink. Whatever, man. Just keep bringing me that.
This is the stuff that nightmares are made of, because once you try meth, you are immediately filled with positive neurotransmitters. Primarily, it's going to be dopamine, norepinephrine, a little bit of serotonin, and these are the neurotransmitters that, again, make you feel like everything is good in your life. If you have social anxiety, you take some meth, you're all of a sudden talking a mile a minute, it alleviates the social anxiety. If you have depression, oh my God, those neurotransmitters alleviate your depression, you immediately feel better. Of course, everything that comes up must come down, meaning the immediate crash after something like meth wears off makes you feel like dog shit. Lower than you did before you even tried it, which is why a lot of people will avoid crashing at all costs, and they'll binge for days, sometimes being up for 3 days in a row. And they will avoid eating, they will avoid obviously sleeping, they will avoid their responsibilities, children, jobs, anything that takes them away from either smoking or shooting up more meth. Again, this is one of those substances that you should probably just never fucking touch. All right, let's move on to number 2. We're going to have to go with, well, in the olden days, it would have been heroin, but these days, you can't even get real heroin unless it's laced with fentanyl. So you could interchange number 2 with being either fentanyl heroin or the fentanyl heroin mix. Now, what causes this to be so addictive is because as soon as you poke that needle through your skin and you inject this chemical, you are instantly shot with feelings of absolute bliss, euphoria. If you have any problems, they just vanish. You melt away and sink into the couch. Anything that is going to cause such an immediate feel-good response in your body that is so dissimilar to anything else that you could ever achieve naturally is going to be immediately addictive. That's why they say some drugs, you just try them once and you're instantly hooked. Especially if you're someone who's going through a really challenging time in your life, you're really depressed, maybe you just lost a loved one, like so many things can cause people to feel like they're in the pits of despair. And when they're in those low states and they go to something like heroin that just alleviates all of their problems, they are prone to become immediately addicted to it. Now, these addictions are also framed by having some of the hardest withdrawals you could humanly go through. If you're trying to, say, get off something like a heroin or fentanyl addiction, the withdrawals can kick in within a day, and it can feel worse than death for some people. They immediately feel sick. Physically, the body feels sick. You're sweating, you're puking, you got a runny nose. You just feel like absolute death. And a lot of people stay in these addictions just because they are trying to avoid going through that debilitating withdrawal phase.
And finally, number 1, the most, in my opinion, addictive drug is actually humans. However, it's not what you would think. It's not love that creates the most addictive chemical cocktail between two parties. It's actually something called the trauma bond. The trauma bond plays with a mix of cortisol and dopamine, getting you addicted to the constant highs and lows. And it is the reason why women who are in severely physically abusive relationships don't leave their partners. Well, it's one of the reasons. I would wager it's the biggest reason. Don't get me wrong, feeling love for someone is a very addictive chemical release because of that oxytocin, but the trauma bond just takes things to a whole other level. And for those of you who think I'm absolutely batshit crazy for including humans as the most addictive drug, well, when you are trauma bonded to someone, it creates an extreme chemical dependence. In fact, a lot of drugs like, say, amphetamines or methamphetamine, how they actually work is it's kind of like an instruction manual to your brain, which signals your brain to release more dopamine and to block the reuptake of dopamine. Meaning things like stimulants aren't actually giving you anything. It's all coming from within you. So the chemical dependence from, say, a relationship is, again, offering your brain instructions to release more of this addictive neurotransmitter. The two things are very, very similar.
Now, a lot of people seem to have a misconception on how a trauma bond is formed and also what a trauma bond is. A trauma bond doesn't mean that you're sharing trauma with someone. In fact, it's a purely one-sided thing. Now, how the trauma bond is formed is very interesting because it's actually done in a very, I guess, counterintuitive way. What happens is you're with someone who's very emotionally abusive, and they constantly keep you in this cycle of valuing you and devaluing you. An example would be they're in like a love bomb stage, and you feel like a lot of love and affection, and you feel like this person really cares about you. And then they'll counter that with, it could even be the next day, they start to criticize you and put you down and make you feel like, I don't know, every problem in the relationship or maybe even the world is your fault, to the point where you start to believe this. And now you're feeling this sense of, oh my God, you got addicted to the good feelings this person was eliciting in you. And you're like thinking, why am I not getting those good feelings back? And then what happens is they reverse it and they start again, filling you up with good feelings, good positive emotions. And it's a cycle of constantly praising you and then abusing you. Praising you, abusing you. And this creates what is called the infamous trauma bond. And the trauma bond can actually be so severe and addictive that you would think that somebody in that situation would want to get away from it and run. But in fact, it messes with, again, this is what it does. It causes the addiction to the dopamine, and the constant spikes in cortisol causes such a strong addiction that often someone who is trauma bonded will go out of their way to take more and more abuse. They will do anything they can. They will convince themselves of lies. They will make excuses for the person. Even if the person is cheating, you name it, any horrible behavior they're doing, they will keep making up these excuses because they are so addicted to that spike after the drop. And this keeps people stuck in abusive relationships that they themselves know are dangerous, sometimes for life. It's a phenomenon that happens to people, and it doesn't logically make sense why it would be so addictive. It sounds counterintuitive, like yes, there's good and bad, but why wouldn't you just get out of it? And part of the reason is you become not only addicted to the good feelings, but you're addicted to specifically the person who is eliciting these feelings out of you. You see them as the only one who can pull you out of the pits of despair that they've sent you down into the depths of. So you start to assign the person causing your trauma as both the hero of your story and the villain. And it's not something that you can rationally think your way out of. In fact, again, all experts suggest that the only way to make it out of those terribly addictive cycles is to treat it like a drug addiction. You have to abstain. You have to remove them from your mind. And just like any drug addiction, this is so much more difficult than it sounds, because it is an actual release of neurotransmitters in the brain that is pretty much in line with being addicted to something like heroin. It is insanely challenging. When, say, somebody leaves a relationship, somebody dies that they loved, this addiction can last, again, for years, because that person was the only one. There's no other drug to replace that person. You know, everyone is unique. And without that person, i.e. that drug, you no longer are getting your fix and you go through withdrawals. Anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed my very fast list of the 5 most addictive drugs, according to me. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you head on over to psychsubstance.shop, buy your very own trip blanket. We still got some stock left. And if you support these videos, head on over to our Patreon page where you can pledge as little as $2 to watch uncut, uncensored videos that we cannot show on YouTube. And as always, if you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment for that algorithm, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Cheers.